Hello everyone! Today I wanted to go over a new fun damage system that I've been working on for my game. I believe it's pretty easily extendable and it's easy to just plug in new methods or new actions depending on your unique needs. So I shamelessly stole the basic concept from the Unity micro FPS game that they kind of put out, and that's really fun. If you wanted to see how a basic FPS works, definitely dive into that and check it out. It's really fun. But I took their whole damage system and kind of made it my own. The way it works, there's three main components: damageable, damager, and health. The way it works is every unique collider, or every unique character or game object that you want to have health, has a health script at its base. So an enemy would have a health, a player would have a health, door that you want to blow up has a health, and then every single collider that's attached to that character has a damageable component. And then that way you have your head has a damageable, your collider for your arms or your body has their own damageable component that all kind of point back to that health. And then every source of damage, every gun, every weapon, explosion, grenade, they all have the damager component. And that gets passed on through the damageable onto the health, and then has the ability to do a callback, so it calls back to the weapon and say, hey, I just caused some damage. So this is the damageable component. This is kind of the basic framework. You have a damage multiplier, which will just kind of default to 1. But you can see, like, if it's a head or a body or something, you want it to be more than 1, or an arm or something, you want it to be less. You're going to have the health that this is attached to, and you're going to have a public event that says, hey, this damageable part was damaged. So in the awake method, you're just going to find the health in the parent or on the same game object, and you're just going to set it to that health. Then you're going to have the take damage, and it's every time you take damage, you're going to have the amount of damage, whether it's area damage, we'll get into that in a minute, and then the actual source of the damage, the damager. If there's no health, then just return. If the health is not null, then you're going to take the total damage, area damage. If it's not area damage, you're going to multiply it by the damage multiplier. Then you're going to say, health, take this damage. Here's the actual damage you're going to take, and here's the source of the damage, and you're going to invoke that event. So looking over to the health script, you're going to start out with your max health, set your current health to your max health. And then in the take damage, if your current health is less than or equal to 0, just return. We're not going to be inflicting damage. Take the health before. Apply the damage from the damage component. And if it's less than 0, you're going to call your death method and set your current health to 0 because you don't want it to be less than that. And then you're just going to take that damage, the amount of the actual damage inflicted, and pass that back to the damager component. Invoke your event saying, hey, I was just damaged, and then pass it back to the damager and say, hey, you inflicted damage, and this is the amount that you inflicted, and here's the actual damage script. Let's click over to damage here. Ignore this top thing. We'll go talk about damage types here in a little bit. But here's all you have on this one is the Unity event. Hey, this one damage inflicted. So every time the health says, hey, you inflicted damage, you're going to raise the event and say, hey, this is the amount of damage I inflicted, and this is the health that I inflicted the damage to. So let's see how that works in a basic scene. Alright, I've set up this basic scene in Unity. I've got 2 cubes. The one on the left is going to be shooting at the cube on the right. On the right, you have a health script with your current health and your max health, and then a damageable script attached to the collider with a damage multiplier of 1. So it's just going to be a basic damage here. On the cube on the left, though, we have the weapon that's going to be actually shooting, and then attached to the weapon is this damager component. So the weapon is just, right now, it's just going to shoot a projectile, and it's going to cause 5 damage. So let's see it in action. Playing. Alright, click over on cube 2. You see our current health just dropped to 95, 90, 85, and so forth. Every 3 seconds, just shoots the projectile across. Alright, so let's take a look at that weapon script. Alright, so you've got the damage, the amount of damage, the muzzle where you're going to shoot the actual projectile from. I have it set up to both shoot a raycast and just launch a projectile. So what I just showed you was it shooting a projectile, but it also does a raycast. So at the beginning, you're going to store your damager component, and at the start method, you're just going to say, hey, there's my damager. I'm going to store it. And then down in your launch projectile, all it does is it instantiates the projectile and then calls the initialize on the projectile script. It's a little bit easier to see it in the raycast. So here's the raycast. It's going to shoot out the raycast. If it hits a collider, it looks for the damageable component, and then it says damageable, take damage. Here's the amount of damage, and here's the damage source. Wait for 3 seconds, and then shoot the raycast again. In the projectile, it's calling an initialize, and it's passing the weapon script into the projectile. So let's take a look at that projectile script. So it's going to store a private variable, the weapon that it's going to be that you just shot the projectile. On the initialize, you're going to get that weapon component, set it to save it as the weapon that's attached to this projectile, and then you're going to get the rigid body and add a force forward based on the speed of the projectile and this weapon. Then, when it hits the collision, it's going to do the same thing as the raycast. It's going to look for the damageable component, say take damage, the amount of damage back from the weapon, and the damage source, which is also from the weapon. And then you're just going to destroy the projectile. Alright, so now that you've seen how the basic setup works, you might see a slight flaw, and that is when it comes to an area of damage, like from an exploding grenade or a bomb or something like that. So if you grab every single damageable component in an area, let's say a humanoid character has a body, arms, head, it has several damageable components, you don't want to apply damage to every single one of those, you just want to apply to everyone that has a unique health script. So the way that works is you're going to be creating a damage area, and you're going to be causing damage only in that damage area. So how does that work? So on our damage area script, we're going to have the range or the area of effect, which is going to default to 5. But then if you have a damage area, you're going to call this inflict damage in the area, the point, the damage amount, and the damager source. Then what you're going to do is create a dictionary of unique damaged healths. And then every single collider in that area, you're going to sort through and find every single damageable and every single health, and then filter out the ones that aren't that are duplicates. And then in the end, you're going to, for each unique damageable area, you're going to be calling the take damage with the amount of damage, say it's true because it is area damage, and then the source of the damage. So back in the damageable script, you see here is area damage. And if it is area damage, you're just going to skip this whole section and apply the base damage and not the damage multiplier, because you don't know if you grab the head, the body, or whatever. You're just going to say here, it's going to be 1 for 1. Here's how much damage you pass on to the health script. So now that you've seen how it all works, you may be asking yourself, why use such a complicated system? Why can't I just shoot my raycast, find the health, and say, hey, health, take the damage away this amount? Well, the first thing is you can have certain areas that are more or less sensitive to damage. So your headshots can be worth double damage, or you can have a shield which doesn't take any damage, but it's still connected to the player. So it's easily changeable like that. Second is callbacks. You have all these different events attached to the health, the damageable, and the damager component. So let's say every time the damager caused some damage, you can say, hey, give me some points. And you can just pop that right into here and say, hey, add my score. Here's how much. Same thing with the damageable. Let's say you have it on your head or something, and you want to have like a little explosion every single time it goes off, like the grunt birthday party or something like that in Halo. It just, boom, confetti going everywhere. Same thing with your health. You can kind of string everything together and use those callbacks to your advantage. Thirdly, it is very extendable. So you can tweak individual systems to kind of add your own way of doing this. The funnest thing that I found so far is damage types. So I'm going to walk you through how I set that up. So in order to add damage types, what we're going to be doing here is first of all creating a scriptable object that we're going to call damage type, and get rid of all the start and update method. Instead of inheriting from mono behavior, we're going to be inheriting from scriptable object. And you're going to want to do a create asset menu so we can create it inside of Unity. Menu name equals damage type. If you want to know more about scriptable objects and how they can be used, I'm going to link below a wonderful talk that somebody else did. Kind of breaks down how you can use scriptable objects in a number of different ways. It's super helpful. All right, so back in Unity, let that compile. And I've already created a folder for our different damage types. So right click under create. At the very top, there is our damage type. So we can create a new damage type, fire, duplicate it, make this one ice, and duplicate it again, and call this one magic or something, whatever, doesn't matter. Then in our damager component, let's take a look at that. You're going to have each damager is going to have a specific damage type that we just added right here. And then all we're going to do in Unity, find our weapon in our damager component and just drag in whichever fire, ice, or magic. Let's just start off with making it fire. Get rid of that event. I'm not calling anything yet. And then we're going to go and edit our damageable script so that it adds or minuses a certain effect, a sensitivity, based on the type of damage. So under here, our damage multiplier is going to happen. Then right after that, we're going to apply our damage sensitivity. Now, first we need to create damage sensitivity. So up here, we're going to create a public struct called damage sensitivity. And inside here, we're going to have a damage type, and a float that is our multiplier. And we're going to need to be able to access this from the Unity Inspector window. So we're just going to make it system.serializable. Whoop. Now that we've created our struct, we're going to create an array of the struct so that we can kind of edit it inside of the Unity Inspector. Yes, then we're just going to call that array our sensitivities. So then bouncing back into Unity, click on our damageable script here once this compiles. And on the right hand side under damageable, you're going to have this little sensitivities drop down. And you can add in however many you want. Let's add in 3 different ones. Why is it not showing? Oh, these need to be public. That way we can access them. Let that compile. Boom. All right, so we have 3 different sensitivities. The first one, we're going to be to fire. The second one to ice. Last one to magic. So fire is going to be 1.5 extra damage. Ice, we're going to be less sensitive, so half damage. And then magic, we're not going to be sensitive at all. So no magic attack is going to affect us. Then back into our damageable script, we're going to be adding those damage sensitivities to the actual damage that comes from the damager. So what we're going to be doing is if the damager.damage type does not equal null. If it is null, then it's just going to pass on the regular damage. We're not going to add any multipliers. But if it's not null, then we're going to look at each of the sensitivities, and if it matches the damage type that's coming from the damager, then we're going to be adding the multiplier. So for each, double tab, variable sensitivity in sensitivities. For each sensitivity in our sensitivity, we're going to be saying if the sensitivity dot damage type is equal to the damager dot damage type, then we're going to be applying the multiplier. So our total damage times equals sensitivity dot damage or multiplier. So then if it comes through and let's say it's fire and we have extra sensitivity, it's going to be adding that multiplier to the total damage and then affecting that total damage down here below. So let's see how that works back in Unity. Once this compiles, we've set up our different sensitivities over here on the right, and then back over to our weapon. We're going to have a damage type. Let's make it fire for now. And we're still shooting the projectile, so let's watch it work. And let's look over at the thing. So damage multiplier of 1.5 times 5 is 7.5, and there it is. So it's taking away 7.5 each time. Let's click back over here. Let's change this out at runtime. Let's make it magic. And then over here, 55. It's still 55 because we're our 0 multiplier down here. It is not affected by magic. Alright, so we've seen how easy it is to add a damage type. Last thing I'm just going to show you real quick is just how to add something like a shield to your component. So over to our second cube, we're just going to create a 3D object. Let's make it a little sphere. Drag it out so it's in front of the other one. And add the damageable component to it. And the damage multiplier overall is going to be 0.2. So the damage that comes through it is only going to be affected by 0.2. And no sensitivities because we don't need to worry about that. So let's watch how this works. Boop. So you see it's because it's the child that's going to be affecting the health. And you see right here it drops the health by 1, which is 5 times 0.2. And if you wanted to move that sphere out of the way and look back over at and then now it's really getting hit because it's got the fire damage still going on. So it's taking away 7.5 instead of just 1 damage each time. So that's just how to add like a little sphere. You can do the same thing, make it the other way around for like a headshot. And you can see how easy it is to add or take away extra damageable components. Thank you so much for watching. That's kind of the summary of how my damage system is working right now. You can see how it's easily extendable and modifiable to whatever you want. And in the future, I plan on adding some like a team system so that it keeps record of all the different damageables or healths and applies less damage or 0 damage from your team or from yourself or something like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching.